Miriam Cole knew she had sold the wrong part of her soul when the boy stopped playing with his train set. He was only 9, small for his age, with solemn brown eyes and a navy sweater too formal for a child. He stood at the far end of the Shaw dining room, one hand resting on the back of a chair, staring at the silver train whistle on the table, as if it had become a weapon. No one else noticed. The adults were too busy pretending the room was civilized. Benedict Shaw sat at the head of the table beneath a chandelier that looked cold enough to cut skin. Around him were lawyers, relatives, a daughter-in-law with red eyes, and 2 silent staff members who had been ordered to stand near the wall as if they were furniture. And then there was Miriam, 62 years old, gray coat, cheap black shoes, a handbag with cracked handles resting in her lap like a confession. Benedict did not look at her when he spoke. "Mrs. Cole," he said, "tell them what you told me." Miriam's mouth went dry. Across the room, the boy watched her. His name was Oliver Shaw. He was Benedict's grandson. He was the reason everyone had gathered, and the only person in the room nobody was truly speaking to. Miriam looked at the folded envelope beside Benedict's water glass. It was cream-colored, thick, expensive. Inside was more money than she had seen in years. Enough to pay the clinic. Enough to keep her own grandson, Noah, breathing through another winter without her choosing between medicine and rent. Benedict had told her it was not a lie. Only the part that protects him, he had said. Now the family waited. Miriam forced herself to look at Oliver's mother, Elise, who sat so still she seemed carved from grief. Then she looked at Benedict, whose fingers tightened around the base of his glass. "Years ago," Miriam began, "Mr. Shaw's son came to the carriage house where I was working. He was upset. He told me he was leaving and didn't intend to come back." A sound moved through the room. Not a gasp, something worse. Relief from people who had wanted a cruel answer because cruel answers are easier than uncertain ones. Elise closed her eyes. Oliver did not. He only reached toward the silver whistle and touched it with one finger. Miriam continued, each word landing heavier than the last. "He said the boy would be better off without him." Benedict's jaw flexed. That was the sentence he had paid for. That was the sentence Miriam had promised to say. But Oliver's face changed in a way no adult face could. It did not harden with anger. It emptied. Something inside him stepped backward. Then he whispered so softly only Miriam heard it. "My father said that?" The dining room continued around him, full of polished knives, family law, and old money. But Miriam heard the crack, and at that moment she understood the terrible thing about a paid lie. It does not end when you say it. It begins there. Benedict cleared his throat. "That will be enough, Mrs. Cole." But it was not enough. Because Miriam had seen something earlier that day. Something she was not supposed to see. In the hallway outside Benedict's private study, while waiting to be summoned, she had watched Oliver kneel beside a wastebasket and pull out a torn photograph. A young man in a work jacket stood beside a little red bicycle. On the back in faded ink were 4 words, "For Oliver when ready." The photograph had been ripped once, then taped, then ripped again. Oliver had hidden it under his sweater. Now, at the dining table, the boy looked at Miriam as if she had personally killed the last good thing he believed. Miriam's fingers curled around her handbag. For a moment, she almost told the rest. The letters, the apology, the visit Benedict had denied, the part where the father had not left cleanly, or coldly, or willingly. But Benedict's eyes moved to the envelope. And Miriam saw Noah in a hospital bed, counting ceiling tiles because he was brave enough not to ask if his medicine cost too much. So she swallowed the truth. The boy swallowed something too. The room moved on. That was how the Shaw family's secret should have stayed buried. Except children have a way of hearing what adults meant to hide. And by the next morning, every clock in Benedict Shaw's mansion had stopped at 3:17. Miriam had not always been the kind of woman who could be bought. For most of her life, she had been known for returning things. A wallet left on a bus seat, a cashier's extra 20, a neighbor's diamond bracelet that turned up under a church pew. People used to say Miriam Cole would hand back money, even if hunger was standing in her kitchen. She used to believe that about herself. Then her daughter died, and belief became a luxury. Noah was 7 when Miriam took him in. A narrow-shouldered boy with his mother's serious eyes and a cough that never seemed to leave. By 9, he had learned to read prescription labels better than storybooks. Miriam cleaned offices at night. She folded linens at a small retirement home in the mornings. On Sundays, she sat beside Noah during church and tried not to look at other grandmothers who had sons and daughters to help them. She was tired in the way poor people become tired when they cannot afford to collapse. Benedict Shaw found her through an old employment file. Years ago, Miriam had worked 3 months at the Shaw estate, mostly laundry and seasonal cleaning. It had been during the summer Benedict's son, Andrew, came back from somewhere nobody discussed. Andrew was in his late 20s then, restless and thin, with the look of a man who had grown up rich but not safe. Miriam remembered him because he spoke to staff like they were human. One evening, she found him in the carriage house holding a toy train whistle. Silver, engraved, small enough to fit in a child's palm. He likes trains, Andrew had said, though the child he meant was still a baby then. Miriam had asked, "Your son?" Andrew nodded. "Oliver." Then he smiled with such pain that Miriam looked away out of respect. That was the same night Benedict's black car arrived without headlights, gliding up the long gravel drive like bad weather. The argument that followed shook the carriage house windows. Miriam had not heard every word, but she heard enough. "You don't get to disappear and return as a father when it suits your conscience," Benedict had said. Andrew shouted back, "You don't get to decide if my son knows I tried." Then a silence. Then Benedict's voice, lower. "You sign the papers, or I make sure Elise spends the next 5 years fighting you instead of raising him." By morning, Andrew was gone. Miriam was told never to mention the argument. She never did. Not when she left that job. Not when Andrew died 2 years later in a private accident. The family never discussed publicly. Not when she saw a small obituary with no mention of a son. Silence, she had learned, was sometimes easier to carry than trouble. But silence has interest. It grows. When Benedict's assistant contacted her decades later, Miriam almost hung up. The voice on the phone was polite in the way powerful people pay others to be polite. "Mr. Shaw is hoping you may clarify a family memory," the assistant said. Miriam said, "I don't keep memories for rich men." But then Noah's clinic called that same afternoon. There were new treatments. There were forms. There were costs. So Miriam went. Benedict received her in a study larger than her entire apartment. The walls held oil paintings of unsmiling ancestors. A chessboard sat near the window, mid-game, black pieces closing in on a white king. He looked older than she expected, not weak, just worn in private places. "Mrs. Cole," he said, "I need your help." "I doubt that." His eyes flickered, almost amused. "You remember my son?" "I remember a young man who looked lonely in a house full of people." Benedict turned toward the window. For a moment, Miriam thought she had wounded him. Then he said, "My grandson is asking questions. As children do, he has found fragments. Old photographs. Hints. He believes his father wanted him." Miriam waited. Benedict did not sit. Men like him often stood when buying people. It made the room itself seem to belong to them. Andrew was unstable, he said. Charming, remorseful, impulsive. He came and went. He hurt everyone who loved him. Did he love the boy? Benedict's face tightened. That is not the useful question. It's the only question a child asks. Benedict walked to his desk and opened a drawer. He removed a cream envelope and placed it between them. Miriam did not touch it. "What is that, security?" he said. "For your grandson." The word struck too close. Miriam's hands, rough from bleach and cold water, curled at her sides. Benedict continued, "I know about Noah. I know the clinic has delayed treatment twice. I know you are behind on rent." Miriam's shame rose hot and fast. "You had me checked?" "I had circumstances checked." "Circumstances don't cough blood into a towel, Mr. Shaw." That stopped him. For the first time, Benedict looked directly at her, and she saw something like regret. Not enough to stop him. Enough to make him human, which was worse. "I am not asking you to invent a story," he said. "Only to confirm what you heard. Andrew said the boy would be better off without him." Miriam stared at him. "He said that after you cornered him." Benedict's voice hardened. "He said it. And what else did he say?" The room became very still. Benedict closed the drawer with a quiet click. That part would not help Oliver. Miriam should have walked out. She knew it then. She knew it before she saw the money. She knew it when Benedict used her grandson's illness as a key. and turned it inside her chest. But Noah had asked her that morning whether the new medicine would make him strong enough to ride a bicycle by summer. And Miriam had lied to him too. "I hope so," she had said, so she took the envelope. The day of the family meeting, Miriam arrived through the service entrance, not the front door. That was Benedict's first small cruelty, or perhaps his habit. He gave her tea in a porcelain cup so thin she feared cracking it, then left her alone in the hallway outside his study. That was where she saw Oliver. He was crouched beside the wastebasket, moving with the carefulness of a child, doing something forbidden but necessary. He removed pieces of torn paper and fitted them on the carpet. A photograph, a partial letter. Miriam saw only a few words before he startled and looked up. "Please tell Oliver I came." His face went pale. "You shouldn't be here," Miriam whispered. "Neither should this," he said. Then he folded the torn pieces and hid them under his sweater. Before she could answer, Benedict's assistant appeared and called her into the dining room. Miriam did what she had been paid to do. She told the half-truth. And by the time she left the Shaw estate, the money in her handbag felt heavier than groceries, heavier than medicine, heavier than sin. That night, Noah slept beside a humming space heater in their apartment. Miriam sat at the kitchen table and counted the bills. Then she placed them back in the envelope and wrote the clinic's name on the front. Her phone rang just after midnight. A woman's voice trembled on the other end. "Mrs. Cole? This is Elise Shaw." Miriam stood. "What happened?" There was a pause. "It's Oliver," Elise said. "He keeps asking what time his father left the house." Miriam closed her eyes. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I didn't know." Elise's voice broke. Then he said, "All the clocks were wrong." The clocks were not broken. Oliver had changed them. Every mantel clock, every hallway clock, every brass carriage clock in the guest rooms. Even the old grandfather clock near the staircase, which required him to drag a chair across the marble floor and climb with the silent determination of a child who had stopped caring about punishment. All of them set to 3:17. Benedict found the first one at breakfast. "What is this?" he asked. Oliver was buttering toast with careful, adult strokes. "What is what, grandfather? The clocks?" Oliver did not look up. "That's when he came." Elise froze. Benedict set his coffee down. "When who came?" "My father." The room changed temperature. Benedict's sister, Margaret, who had flown in for the family meeting and stayed to watch the damage settle, gave a sharp laugh. Children invent things when adults feed them scraps. Oliver looked at her. "Mrs. Cole didn't feed me scraps. She fed me the part grandfather bought." No one spoke. Miriam was not there, but her name entered the room like a dropped match. Benedict pushed back his chair. "Oliver, that is enough." "It was enough yesterday," Oliver said. "Today I want the rest." Elise covered her mouth. There are moments when a family realizes the youngest person in the room has been listening for years. That morning was one of them. By noon, Benedict's assistant called Miriam again. This time there was no politeness. "Shaw requires your presence." Miriam looked at Noah, who was building a cardboard ramp for toy cars on the rug. His cheeks had more color than usual because the clinic had restarted one medication on credit. "I can't come today," she said. The assistant lowered his voice. "Mrs. Cole, I'd strongly advise you not to make this difficult." Miriam almost laughed. Difficult was choosing which bill could wait without someone suffering. Difficult was pretending not to be afraid every time Noah coughed. Difficult was waking up at 62 and realizing your honesty had a price, and someone had finally named it. Still, she went. Benedict met her in the library this time. No tea, no porcelain cup. The cream envelope was on the desk, but now it was empty. "You spoke to him," Benedict said. "I answered one question in a hallway." "You had no right." Miriam's tiredness sharpened into anger. "And you had the right to buy my mouth?" He flinched, but only slightly. "You do not understand what you've done." "I understand better than I want to." Benedict walked toward her. "Oliver is fragile. Children are not glass, Mr. Shaw. They're soil. Whatever you bury in them grows." For a second, Benedict's face twisted. Not rage, pain. Then the door opened. Oliver stood there, holding the silver train whistle. No child should have looked that calm. "Did he really say I was better off without him?" Oliver asked Miriam. Benedict turned. "Oliver, leave us." No. The word was small, but it did not move. Elise appeared behind him, pale and frightened, but she did not pull him away. Miriam stared at the boy. The lie rose in her throat again. Familiar now, poisonous but useful. She thought of Noah. She thought of medicine. She thought of the clinic. Then Oliver lifted the whistle. He gave me this, didn't he? Benedict's expression betrayed him before his words could recover. Miriam saw it. So did Elise. You told me that was from your father, Oliver said to Benedict. You said you saved it for me. Benedict said nothing. But he brought it himself, Oliver whispered. Didn't he? Miriam's hands began to tremble. Benedict spoke quietly. Andrew left many things behind. That's not what I asked. The boy looked at Miriam again. And there it was, the terrible power of a child's trust. Not innocence, trust. The belief that if an adult was finally cornered by truth, they might choose it. Miriam could not do it, not yet. I heard him say you'd be better off without him, she said, voice breaking. Oliver's face closed. Benedict exhaled. But Miriam added, I did not hear why. Benedict's relief died. Oliver looked up. What does that mean, it means? Miriam said slowly. A sentence can be true and still be used as a lie. Benedict stepped toward her. Stop. Miriam stepped back. No, she said. I stopped once. That's how we got here. The library door opened wider. Margaret entered, stiff with outrage. Behind her came Benedict's attorney, a thin man with silver glasses and a voice meant for contracts, not children. Mrs. Cole, the attorney said, you were invited here as a witness, not as a moral philosopher. Miriam looked at him. Then you should have invited a cleaner with less memory. That line should have ended the matter. Instead, Benedict did something worse than shouting. He softened. Miriam, he said, using her first name for the first time, you have a sick boy at home. The room went silent. Elise looked from Benedict to Miriam. Oliver's eyes widened. Miriam felt the floor tilt. Benedict had not meant to reveal it, or perhaps he had. Power often slips and calls itself accident. You promised, Miriam whispered. Benedict's face tightened with regret too late to matter. Oliver stared at her. He paid you because someone you love is sick? Miriam could not answer. That was answer enough. The attorney closed his folder. Margaret made a disgusted sound. Elise turned away as if struck. And Benedict Shaw, billionaire, grandfather, keeper of family dignity, had succeeded in making Miriam look exactly like what she feared she was. A woman who had sold one child's truth to save another child's life. Oliver did not cry. That would have been easier. He walked past them all, placed the silver whistle on Benedict's desk, and said, Then none of you loved me for free. After that, he stopped speaking at meals. He stopped using the name grandfather. He stopped sleeping in his bedroom and began sleeping on the floor of the small train room Andrew had once painted blue. He stopped drawing people his school called twice. He gave away his winter coat to a boy who had forgotten his, then told the teacher, Some things shouldn't belong to you if they were bought wrong. Elise began sleeping outside his door. Benedict began losing control of the house in small, humiliating ways. Staff whispered. Margaret left early. The attorney advised removing Oliver from emotionally suggestive spaces, which made Elise slap the folder out of his hands. And Miriam, back in her apartment, did not cash the remaining money. She sat beside Noah while he slept and listened to his breathing. On the third evening, he woke and found her crying. Grandma? She wiped her face quickly. Go back to sleep, baby. Did the medicine cost too much? Miriam looked at him, and something inside her broke cleanly instead of cracking. No, she said, but it may have cost wrong. The next morning, she put the cream envelope in her handbag and took the bus back to the Shaw estate. She did not call first. She did not enter through the service door. She rang the front bell. The butler hesitated when he saw her. Miriam understood. Houses like the Shaw estate had rules about who belonged at which door. I need to see Mrs. Shaw, she said. Elise or Mr. Shaw? Elise. That was the first rebellion. Elise received her in the sitting room. Not the library, not the dining room, not any room designed for judgment. This room had sunlight, a vase of wilting yellow flowers, a child's book left open on the sofa. Miriam placed the envelope on the coffee table. I can't keep it. Elise stared at it. Is all of it there? No, Miriam swallowed. Some went to the clinic. Elise's face changed, but not with contempt. With your grandson? Yes. How old? 9. Elise closed her eyes. Of course he is. The shared age sat between them like a second envelope. Miriam reached into her handbag and removed the torn photograph Oliver had dropped the day after the family meeting. She had found it near the side entrance, damp from rain, and kept it flat between two old church bulletins. Elise took it with shaking hands. Andrew stood in the picture beside the red bicycle, younger, thinner, hopeful in the way only guilty people can be when they are trying to repair something. On the back, for Oliver when ready. Elise pressed the photograph to her mouth. I never saw this. I don't think you were meant to. Elise looked up. What else do you know? Miriam could have protected herself. She could have said only what she had seen. She could have blamed Benedict for all of it and left clean. But the truth demanded more than accuracy. It demanded cost. I know Andrew came back, Miriam said. I know he brought the whistle. I know he argued with Benedict. I know he said you both deserved to know he had tried. Elise began to cry without sound. And I know I let your son believe the cruelest part because I was scared for mine. Elise did not forgive her. That mattered. Instant forgiveness would have been too easy, and both women knew it. Instead, Elise stood and said, Come with me. They found Oliver in the train room. The room was small by Shaw standards, which meant it was still larger than Miriam's apartment. Blue walls, shelves of model trains, a painted mountain tunnel, a rug with tracks woven into it. On the floor, Oliver sat cross-legged beside a train engine, not moving it, just holding it. Elise knelt near him. Oliver, she said, Mrs. Cole came back. I know. Miriam stayed by the door. The boy did not look at her. I brought the money back, she said. That doesn't unbuy it. No, Miriam said. It doesn't. That made him look up. Adults often ruined apologies by trying to make them smaller. Miriam did not. I lied by telling only the part that hurt you, she said. Your father did say those words, but I believe he said them because he had been made to think leaving was the only way to stop a war around you. Oliver's chin trembled. Did he want me? Miriam gripped her handbag. The first crack had opened days ago. Now came the denial, the proof, the confirmation, and the thing that could not be undone. I believe he did, Miriam said. Oliver's eyes filled. Behind them a voice said, Belief is not proof. Benedict stood in the doorway. He looked as if he had not slept. Elise rose slowly. Then give us proof. Benedict's face hardened. You are letting guilt and a paid witness poison this family. Miriam reached into her handbag again. I was not the only person in that carriage house. Benedict went still. Elise turned. Miriam looked at the butler, who had followed Benedict at a distance, and now stood in the hall, pale as linen. Mr. Vale, Miriam said softly. You were there. The old butler's eyes closed. For 30 years, Mr. Vale had served the Shaw family with quiet steps and ironed collars. He had carried trays, opened doors, and learned the aristocratic art of seeing everything while appearing to see nothing. Benedict said, Vale, one word. Warning and plea. Mr. Vale looked at Oliver. Then he looked at Miriam, and she saw a man just as tired of silence as she was. Yes, he said. I was there. Benedict's shoulders dropped half an inch. Elise whispered, What did you hear, mister? Vale's voice shook. I heard Mr. Andrew ask to see the baby. I heard Mr. Shaw refuse. I heard Mr. Andrew say he had written every month. Elise made a small sound. Letters, Oliver asked. Benedict said. Andrew wrote when it suited him. Then disappeared when responsibility required more than ink, mister. Vale looked at his employer with sadness. That is not all, sir. The old man walked out and returned with a small brass key. Benedict stared at it. You kept that? No, sir, Mr. Vale said. Mrs. Shaw did. Elise frowned. My mother-in-law, Mr. Vale nodded. Before she passed, she asked me to keep the blue cabinet locked until the boy was old enough to ask the right question. Oliver whispered, What question, mister? Vale looked at him. Not whether your father left, he said, but who taught you he wanted to. They went to the upstairs hall. The blue cabinet stood beneath a portrait of Benedict's late wife, Clara. Miriam had passed it earlier and thought nothing of it. It was narrow, old-fashioned, painted deep blue with brass flowers on the handles, mister. Vale unlocked it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, some sealed, some opened, some returned, some never sent. Elise reached first. Her fingers shook as she unfolded one. Oliver stood beside her, too afraid to breathe. Elise read aloud, voice breaking. Dear Elise, I know I have no right to ask for trust. I am writing anyway because Oliver should never mistake my absence for indifference. Benedict turned away. The second proof had arrived. But proof alone is cold. The heart needs the final human confirmation. At the bottom of the stack was a small cassette recorder and a note in Clara Shaw's handwriting. Benedict saw it and whispered, "No." Elise picked up the note. For Oliver, when men finish defending themselves, and a child still needs the truth. No one moved. Mr. Vale found an old player in a storage drawer. The machine clicked, hissed, then filled the hallway with the voice of a man long dead. Andrew. He sounded young, frightened, alive. Mom said I should record this because letters can be burned and lawyers can turn fathers into rumors. Oliver, if you hear this someday, I don't know what they told you. I wasn't ready when you were born. That part is mine. I was selfish. I was scared. But I came back. I tried to come back. If I failed you, let it be for what I did, not for what someone needed you to believe. Oliver began to cry then, not loudly. He folded in half around the pane, as if holding himself together with both arms. Elise dropped to her knees and pulled him close. The tape continued. There is a silver whistle. I bought it at the station the morning I decided to come home. I wanted to give it to you myself. If you have it, then some part of me reached you. If you don't, then I hope love finds another door. Miriam covered her mouth. Benedict leaned against the wall. Everything had been planted. The whistle, the clocks, the letters, the ripped photograph, the phrase "when ready," the locked blue cabinet, the butler's silence, the boy's question about time. The truth had not appeared suddenly. It had been waiting in the house for years. Oliver pulled away from his mother and looked at Benedict. Did you hide him from me? Benedict could have denied it. For one last second, the old billionaire stood before the familiar door, control on one side, truth on the other. Then he looked at the boy's face and discovered there are losses even rich men cannot negotiate. Yes, he said. Elise shut her eyes. Oliver stared at him. Benedict's voice broke. I thought I was saving you. From him, from becoming him, from waiting at windows, from loving a man who might fail you again. Oliver wiped his face with his sleeve. So you made him fail forever? Benedict did not answer. That was the irreversible truth. The Shaw family did not collapse in a dramatic scene. That would have been easier too. There were no police cars, no screaming reporters, no grand public ruin. Just a mansion full of rooms that suddenly seemed too large for the lies they had held. Elise moved Oliver out of the main house that evening. Not far, only to the small guest cottage near the old orchard. But in families like the Shaws, distance was not measured in yards. It was measured in access. Benedict did not stop her. He stood at the front steps as staff carried 2 suitcases and Oliver's train box across the gravel path. Miriam watched from near the gate, feeling like an intruder at the funeral of a living family. Oliver carried the silver whistle himself. At the cottage door, he turned back. For one moment, Miriam thought he might speak to Benedict. Instead, he walked toward her. She straightened. He stopped a few feet away and looked at her with the exhausted seriousness of a child who had been forced to understand adults too soon. Is your grandson going to be okay? He asked. Miriam's throat tightened. I hope so. Don't lie. The words hurt, but they were clean. Miriam nodded. I don't know. But I'm going to try to help him without hurting you anymore. Oliver looked down at the whistle. My father said love should find another door. Yes, you came to the front door today. Miriam did not trust herself to speak. Oliver held out the whistle. She shook her head. No, honey. That belongs to you. I know, he said. I'm not giving it away. He placed it in her hand for only a second, then took it back. A child's version of forgiveness is often not forgiveness at all. It is testing whether an adult can hold something precious without stealing it. Miriam passed the test. Oliver returned to his mother. The next morning, Benedict Shaw sent a car to Miriam's apartment. She refused it. So he came himself, not with an assistant, not with an attorney, not with flowers. He stood in the hallway outside her apartment in a dark coat worth more than her furniture and looked, for the first time, deeply out of place. Noah peeked from behind Miriam. Benedict looked at the boy and seemed to understand the full shape of what he had done. I came to pay the clinic directly, he said. Miriam's eyes hardened. No, Mrs. Cole, no more money with strings. There are no strings. There are always strings when a man like you reaches into his pocket instead of his conscience. Benedict took the blow quietly. Then he removed a folder and placed it on the small table by her door. I established a medical trust, he said. Not in your name, not controlled by me. Administered through a children's fund. Your grandson qualifies. So will others. Miriam did not touch the folder. Why? Benedict looked past her into the apartment, at the patched sofa, the school books, the inhaler on the table, the toy cars lined carefully beside a pillow. Because yesterday my grandson asked me what money is for if it can't make someone brave. Miriam's face softened despite herself. That sounds like him. Yes, Benedict said. Unfortunately, it does. He turned to leave, then stopped. I will not ask forgiveness from you. Good. I would not know what to do with it if you gave it. Miriam studied him. Power had not left Benedict Shaw, but certainty had. And for a man like him, that was a real consequence. What will you do about Oliver? She asked. Benedict looked down the narrow stairwell. Wait outside the door I locked, he said. For as long as it takes. Months passed. Not in a montage of perfect healing, because families do not heal that way. Oliver still had angry days. Elise still cried over letters at the kitchen table. Benedict still reached for control when silence frightened him. Miriam still woke up some nights hearing her own voice say the sentence she had been paid to say. But some things changed. Oliver and Elise made a weekly ritual of reading one letter from Andrew, and then putting it back in the blue cabinet, which had been moved to the cottage and left unlocked. Mr. Vale retired with a pension Benedict doubled without being asked, though the old butler told him. It is not generosity when it arrives 30 years late. Benedict accepted that. Noah began treatment through the Children's Fund. He did not know all the details, only that his grandmother cried in the clinic bathroom the day the first bill came back paid. One Saturday in early spring, Miriam received a small envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photograph. Oliver stood beside a red bicycle, one hand on the handlebar, the silver whistle hanging from a cord around his neck. Benedict stood several feet behind him, not touching, not posing as if all had been forgiven, just present, waiting. On the back in a child's careful handwriting were 5 words. For Mrs. Cole when ready. Miriam sat at her kitchen table for a long time. Then she placed the photograph beside Noah's medicine schedule, not to hide it, not to worship it, but to remember. A lie had bought her time. The truth had given it back meaning. That summer, Benedict held a small family gathering at the orchard cottage. Not in the great dining room. Never there again. Miriam was invited. She almost did not go, but Noah insisted because he wanted to see the trains. The afternoon was warm. Sunlight moved through apple leaves. Elise set lemonade on a wooden table. Mr. Vale came as a guest and sat with his hat on his knee, looking both uncomfortable and pleased. Oliver showed Noah the train room. Benedict stood alone near the orchard fence. Miriam joined him. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, Benedict said, Andrew loved that tree. Miriam looked at the old apple tree, twisted but blooming. You ever tell Oliver that? Not yet. Why not? Benedict's mouth tightened. I'm afraid he'll ask whether I loved Andrew too. Miriam watched the boys through the cottage window. Oliver was helping Noah place a train engine carefully on the track. And did you? Benedict's eyes shone badly. Miriam nodded. That may be the first honest thing worth telling him. Benedict looked at her, and for once there was no transaction between them. No envelope, no pressure, no debt disguised as help. Just 2 old people standing near the wreckage of choices they could not undo. Inside the cottage, the train began to move. Noah laughed first, then Oliver. The sound came through the open window, bright and ordinary and almost unbearable. Benedict closed his eyes. Miriam looked at the boys, at the little train circling its track, at the silver whistle resting against Oliver's sweater, catching the afternoon light. No one in that yard had escaped consequence, but not every broken thing had stayed buried. And sometimes the first honest sound in a family is not an apology. Sometimes it is a child laughing in a room where no one is lying anymore. Afterglow, some stories remind us that not every lie begins with cruelty. Some begin with fear. Some begin with grief. Some begin with an adult telling themselves that a child is too young for the truth. But children often feel the shape of a secret long before they know its name. Miriam's mistake was not that she was desperate. Many good people become desperate when someone they love is in pain. Her mistake was believing that another child's heart could be used as the price. And Benedict's mistake was not only hiding the truth, it was confusing control with protection. The hardest lesson here is that truth does not have to be thrown like a stone. It can be given carefully, gently, with love. But when adults bury it completely, children may spend years blaming themselves for a wound they did not create. So here is the question. Is a painful truth kinder than a comforting lie when a child's sense of being loved is at stake? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy emotional stories about hidden truths, quiet courage, and the choices that shape a family, consider subscribing for the next story.